Hello, my name is Ari Perez. I'm an organizer with the May 30th Alliance. And the reason we call for this press conference today is in response to another murder ruled justified by the Winnebago Boone County Integrity Task Force. A murder being ruled justified is not new. A murder being ruled justified by this task force is simply exactly what it does. But before we get into the specifics of what was said in the press conference or the specifics of the case, I want to give you a little background information as to why we're here today. This is day 321 of the ongoing occupation outside the City Hall. This occupation started on October 3rd, a day after Tyrus Jones was gunned down, shot 5 times in the back while running away by Rockford Police Department officer Dominic McNeese. And since then, we have continued this occupation in an attempt to raise awareness to the police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice that plagues this city. And while doing so, while being here for these 321 days, on January 5th, Denzel Duvant was beat half to death by Rockford Police Department officers. Some of those Rockford Police Department officers include Dominic McNeese, who a month after he came back to work participated in the assault on Denzel Duvant. And one of those officers, Brian Prine, had murdered Shannon Graves a decade prior. And some more of those officers participated in unlawful and unjust arrests during the city market protests. So this was just another case and another example of the police terrorism that occurs on a daily basis in this city. Then after this, the next case of police terrorism in this city would be the murder of Faustin Guetigo, who was shot 8 times inside his own home by Joseph Boulard and by Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Boulard and Deputy Eden, I believe. Then the day after that, Jose Gonzalez Jr., a 19-year-old who was running away, was shot while running away. Who was running away was shot by Owen McGinnis, who participated in assaults on May 30th. So what we're doing here is trying to raise awareness to these issues, to hopefully dismantle, destroy white supremacy and white nationalism. Another case of police terrorism that occurred was the death of Raymond Jackson. Raymond Jackson was killed as a result of a police chase, a needless and senseless police chase. So the reason we're being here, the main reason we have continued this occupation is because none of these issues have stopped. What happened today, another justified murder, is another example of no progress has really been made. People up to 2,000 times per year use of force is used by Rockford Police Department officers, and not one time have they been held accountable, have they been fired, or have they faced any type of repercussions. So we've been here for 321 days, and this justified ruling is just another reason why we should never leave. As long as these issues aren't being addressed, as long as these issues aren't being fixed, as long as nothing is being done, no real work is being done, we'll be outside City Hall. So I'm going to pass it along to another speaker and to discuss these issues.
I want that to be seen. All right. I don't introduce myself typically, so we're just going to skip that. I want to say, first and foremost, I want to extend my deepest condolences to the loved ones of Faustin Guetigo. This is a family who is still grieving the loss of a husband, father, son, cousin, and friend, who now have to endure the injustice of this incredibly flawed, racist, and oppressive system. To Rose, I am so sorry. We want you to know we love you, support you, and stand in solidarity with you. We understand that you were in need of help to de-escalate a situation in which you did not feel safe, and it is not your fault that you were led to believe contacting the police was the best option, and they failed you so horrifically that it resulted in the murder of your husband. At all. I wish I could say we were surprised by the findings of the Winnebago Boone County Integrity Task Force. I wish there was even a small part of me that hoped for a possibility that anyone who was involved in this process would at some point acknowledge the situation did not necessitate the extent of force used on Faustin. However, when you're faced with the reality that every single case since the establishment of the task force has been ruled justified, it leaves no room for that kind of wishful thinking. If we continue to subscribe to the idea that police, district attorneys, state's attorneys, judges, jails, or prisons are here to serve or protect us, we will continue to be led like lambs to the slaughter. This system was not created for us. This system was created to uphold white supremacy, and that is why we stand before you following a gross miscarriage of justice after the murder of Faustin Guetigo, who was shot 7 to 8 times by Joseph Brulard. Joseph Brulard is a murderer. And for the state's attorney, Jay Hanley, to attempt to humanize him while criminalizing Faustin is disgusting. It's sick. Joseph Brulard didn't have to take another man's life. He, like other officers before him, made that decision to take a life that he did not value. The Winnebago-Boone County Integrity Task Force, as I've said before, is for PR, to smooth over the outrage and backlash after an officer-involved shooting or in-custody death. They are currently working on 2 other cases that are certain to conclude with similar results, because when you base your decision on a policy that allows officers to do whatever they feel is necessary, it will result in terrorization and brutalization of members of this community, and no one will be held accountable or face consequences because of it. This system is not for us. It is not in our best interest. We need to demand a better system. We owe it to Faustin Guetigo. Rest in power, Faustin Guetigo. If not for him, we owe it for Jose Gonzalez Jr. If not for him, we owe it for Mikey Sago Jr. If not for him, we owe it to Logan Bell. If not for him, we owe it to Carrie Blake. If not for him, we owe it to Tyrus Jones. If not for him, we owe it to Shannon Graves. If not for him, we owe it to Philip Johnson. If not for him, we owe it to every other person who has been brutalized by the Rockford Police Department, the Winnebago County Sheriff's Department, the Park Police, the Illinois State Police, Boone County, any other jurisdiction, any other police officers, any other person who says they're working for the community or in the best interest of upholding the law. We owe it to all of these victims, all of these people who have had to experience situations like this, or being a family member of somebody who's experienced situations like this. We owe it to all of these people to change this system to work for us.
I want to address 2 different things that was said in this press conference that Jay Hanley hosted today. One was the fact that he said that Brulard had mentioned in his police reports that it seemed as if the bullets didn't affect Faustin Guetigo. Jay Hanley got up there and said in this press conference that Brulard had wrote down in his police reports that it seemed like the gunshots did not affect him at all. He was shot 7 times by Joseph Brulard. He was shot twice in the arm, and I still have not seen any clear-cut video that shows Faustin Guetigo hitting Joseph Brulard in the head. How does that happen? It's 5-6 cops there, and not one body cam has clear-cut footage of the pipe supposedly hitting Joseph Brulard in the head. What I do see is Joseph Brulard shooting Faustin Guetigo while he's climbing up the stairs. What I do see is an officer from outside of the building, from outside of the house, shoot Faustin Guetigo. A senseless shooting. He said that Jay Hanley said during this press conference that the officer who shot from outside the home felt the same things that Joseph Brulard felt. He felt that he might be a danger to other police officers and might be able to cause great bodily harm or even death to other police officers. At this point, Faustin Guetigo had been shot 7 times. At that point, before the other officer had shot, he had been tased and he was on the ground. That is when the second officer shot. After Faustin Guetigo was shot 7 times and after Faustin Guetigo was tased. So what does that say? What does that say really? That officer was justified in his shooting really. That officer was justified in his shooting too. That you can get shot 7 times, fall to the ground, you get tased, and another officer can shoot you again, and that be ruled justified too. What are the parameters to an unjustified shooting? What is there any? Is there any? Because so far I have not seen one. Because so far I have not seen even a sliver of doubt and a sliver of hope that it might be an unjustified shooting. And Jay Hanley said that he expects Joseph Boulard to go back to work today, or tomorrow rather. How would you feel if you got pulled over by a cop who just shot somebody 7 times? How would you feel getting pulled over, having an officer come to your home after he just came back to work from murdering somebody? How would you feel if in your kid's school, Joseph Boulard is working? He just came back to work after killing somebody. And he said that he doesn't know if Boulard has even been off work this entire time. How can we be sure that an officer who will shoot somebody 7 times, how can we be sure that an officer who says that bullets don't affect somebody, how can we be sure that that same officer doesn't lie in his police reports? How can we be sure that that same officer doesn't lie in his daily work? How can we be sure of those issues? How can we be sure? So the question that I'm going to end this on is how many more? How many more people, how many more times does this have to happen before something is done about it? How many more times do these issues have to take place? Because 2 times per year, they try to kill somebody. Right here in Rockford. Not nowhere else, right here in Rockford. Police terrorism is the biggest problem to black people and people of color in this city. And what is being done about it? We have people in this building who don't even talk about it or don't address it in any way. We have people down there in Winnebago County Board who don't address it or say their names of the people who have been killed. As far as I know, Shirley has still not said Faustin Guetigo. Still has not even said his name. Not has tried to face any type of repercussions. Not has tried to launch any type of investigation into the use of force that Joseph Boulard has used in the past and has continued to use. Because I guarantee you, Joseph Boulard is a repeat offender. Joseph Boulard is a repeat offender, and I guarantee you, justified shooting, he back to work tomorrow, I guarantee you his name going to come up again. It's a repeat abuser of this community, who has been enabled and empowered by these racist, terroristic police departments. I guarantee you, he's a repeat offender. I guarantee you, we're going to hear about another lawsuit for excessive use of force that named Joseph Boulard as an officer involved. I guarantee you, we're going to hear about Owen McGinnis when he go back to work, when that case get ruled justified, just like every other case has been ruled justified. Owen McGinnis, repeat offender. Dominic McNeese, a month after he came back to work, participated and initiated the assault of Denzel Duvant. Has there been anything done to guarantee that Boulard, a month from now, a week from now, a year from now, won't assault another community member, won't brutalize another community member? This is an officer, and these aren't just specific to these individual police officers. The Rockford Police Department, the Winnebago County Sheriff deputies, they're filled with them. They're filled with officers who get enabled and empowered and who require the use of force and the use of deadly force. A justified ruling, a justified murder, a murder that is ruled justified, is saying it's enabling those officers to use force again. It's enabling those officers to use deadly force again. We're standing right here in front of this building. The first thing this mayor of this city, one of the first things the mayor of this city did when he took into office is to give Oda Poole damn near $1 million settlement. That's the first thing the mayor of the city did while he was in office, when he took office. These are repeat offenders that are abusing this community. Repeat offenders that are empowered, encouraged, and enabled to terrorize this community. These are repeat offenders. Their names are going to come up again.
Okay, my name is Leslie Rolfe. I'm a member of the May 30th Alliance. The May 30th Alliance is a direct action organization located in Rockford, Illinois, dedicated to the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in Winnebago County. And I want to take a moment to address the recently justified findings that came out from the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office and from the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force. Faustin Guetigo was murdered on April 10, 2021 in Winnebago County because Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy Joseph Brulard and his fellow officers did not value Faustin's life. Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot on April 11, 2021 in Rockford, Illinois because Rockford Police Department Officer Owen McGinnis and his fellow officers did not value Jose's life. As tempting as it would be to cast all of the blame on the individual officers involved, Joseph Brulard and Owen McGinnis, and to scapegoat them as bad cops or rotten apples, the facts of the situation are much more complicated. In truth, the devaluing of black and brown lives by the law enforcement in Rockford, Illinois and Winnebago County began long before either of these officers were employed by the Winnebago County Sheriff Deputies or the Rockford Police Department. And unless we begin, to adequately, genuinely, and publicly admit, address, and absolve our society of the root causes of the devaluing of black and brown lives by law enforcement, it will last long after both Joseph Brulard and Owen McGinnis are employed by these institutions. And that is the word that we must continually keep at the forefront of our consciousness: institution. Though institutions are created by and made up of individuals, we exist at a time in American history in which the dominant form of racism is not individual but institutional. And it is that institutional racism which leads to the perpetual devaluing of black and brown lives in Rockford, Illinois, and in Winnebago County. In 2021, one of the strongest weapons of institutional racism is putting more attention on the individual than on the institutions. But we must remember that however unjustifiable it is for Joseph Brulard and Owen McGinnis as individual officers to use deadly force against citizens of this community, it is even more unjustifiable for the institution of policing to continue for decades to train, arm, and deploy officers, sending them to use deadly force on the streets in this community. Institutional racism in policing manifests itself in two forms: microaggressions and macroaggressions. Microaggressions in Rockford, Illinois are things such as, but not limited to, black people being pulled over 3 times as often as white people, a statistical fact; black and brown neighborhoods being over-policed at higher rates than white neighborhoods in the same city; and a lack of respect and discriminatory treatment of black and brown citizens by law enforcement. Just as these microaggressions work to dehumanize the people they are done to, they also have the effect of barbarizing the people who commit them. Just as they historically had the effect of dehumanizing the communities that they are done to, they have also had the effect of barbarizing the institutions that commit them. These microaggressions committed on a daily basis become the proverbial straws that break the camel's back and manifest themselves as the macroaggressions of deadly force being used, as it was when Faustin Guetigo was murdered by Joseph Brulard and when Jose Gonzalez Jr. was shot down by Owen McGinnis. These macroaggressions of violence are then covered up by the city of Rockford government, which operates on institutional racism, and covered up by the Winnebago County government, which also operates on institutional racism, before being justified by the Winnebago Boone Integrity Task Force and the Winnebago County State's Attorney's Office, both of which also operate on the same basis of institutional racism. The fact is, institutional racism is embedded into the fabric of the society in Winnebago County, and that is the definition of having a systemic problem. Now, there are many roads to a solution for us to travel upon to reach a destination as a community in Winnebago County where police terrorism acts like the ones done to Faustin and Jose are no longer justified, covered up, or even committed. However, every single one of those trails must be blazed with an addressing and acknowledging of the root causes of police terrorism along the way. We must educate people on the cold, hard fact that even though an individual may join law enforcement to be a force for good, individuals do not manipulate systems. Systems manipulate individuals. And the system of policing in this county and city is one of institutional oppression, institutional exploitation, institutional corruption, and institutional violence that disproportionately affects communities and people of color. And no matter if the individual is a black woman, a Latino man, or a white man, once employed by law enforcement, they become an agent for that system of oppression, exploitation, corruption, and violence, and they will disproportionately play out that agenda on communities and people of color. So just as much and even more so than the individuals, we must hold the systems that manipulate them accountable. The blood of Faustin Guetigo is on the hands of Joseph Brulard and the Winnebago County Sheriff Deputy's Office and the Winnebago County government, just as the blood of Jose Gonzalez Jr. is on the hands of Owen McGinnis, the Rockford Police Department, and the City of Rockford government. That collection of institutions brings me to the next point which must be spoken upon. The mayor of Rockford, Illinois, Tom McNamara, and the Winnebago County Board Chairman, Chiarelli, have left much to be desired in their lackluster response to the police terrorism that has been inflicted upon our citizens. Chiarelli released a statement to the Rockford Register-Star, and that was the extent of his response. That statement did not include the name of Faustin Guetigo. The law enforcement in this county did not include the name of Faustin Guetigo, the man who was murdered by his law enforcement. Tom McNamara has refused to hold press conferences, refused to say the names of victims, and in the case of Denzel Duvant, who was assaulted January 5th of this year, refused to even acknowledge incidents of police terrorism have taken place when it concerns the Rockford Police Department. There are no aldermen releasing statements about these acts of police terrorism when they take place, and no county board members releasing statements when these actions take place, because the government of Winnebago County and the government of the city of Rockford are complicit with these acts of police terrorism and violence that take place. When Faustin Guetigo and Jose Gonzalez Jr.'s loved ones filed civil suits against the people responsible for the barbaric acts that were done, it will be Winnebago County government that will pay blood money, and it will be the city of Rockford government that pays that blood money out. And the truth is that the city and the county would rather pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions to a family after murdering their loved one, rather than take the time to address and absolve the root issues that lead to them being murdered. And the truth of that is that they make hundreds of millions of dollars off the perpetuation of those root issues that lead to that violence manifesting in acts of police terrorism like the ones that stole the life of Faustin Guetigo. How do they make hundreds of millions of dollars? These institutions make money off of every human being that is in a Winnebago County jail. These institutions make money off of fines from arrest, false and otherwise. These institutions make money off of fines from false citations and otherwise, and the list goes on continuously. Meanwhile, one of the side effects of these oppressive and exploitative acts are the macroaggressions of police violence that lead to the murder of Faustin Guetigo and the shooting down of Jose Gonzalez Jr. So in closing, I want to say this. It will only be when we as a community of people begin to acknowledge and address these hard truths of police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice that we will be able to move in unity towards absolving ourselves of their existence in our community. We are very far behind where we should be as a community when it comes to dealing with these root issues. However, I find comfort in the fact that this is a marathon and not a sprint, meaning that we have the time to make up that distance, if we will dedicate ourselves to the struggle for it. If you are looking for ways to participate in that struggle, you can come down to the county board building at 8 o'clock tonight, and you can pick up a piece of chalk and write Faustin Guetigo's name. If you are trying to find ways in which to participate in that struggle, you can come down to City Hall and pick up a piece of chalk and write Jose Gonzalez Jr.'s name. If you are trying to find ways to participate in that struggle, you can come to Say Their Name Square downtown and leave balloons and leave flowers near the memorials that Say Their Name Square. If you are trying to find ways to participate in that struggle, then you can come to City Market on Fridays and protest and hold a sign of Faustin Guetigo to remind people of these issues. And if those options don't work, that is fine. But we must start the starting. All right, that's it. I don't know if there's any questions. Anybody got questions or anything like that? I sent a message to Rose. I did speak to Rose. I haven't had a chance to have a sit down with the family like Jay Hanley. I think that's a lot because of the situation. They're sort of hoping to get some sort of justice for them. And I think for us, we're sort of the last resort once those things haven't happened. So I did reach out to Rose after I watched the findings come out. Anything else? All right. Sounds good. All right, we outside.